This thing's a lot of fun. I know it probably seems quite slow on the video, but it feels like I'm just ripping out here through the wet trails. Anyways, we made it. We're out here at the Sawmill. I just had a quick go around with the golf cart. This thing is, well, it's not exactly the fastest unit on the trails, but it's certainly one of the most fun. We're out here at the Sawmill today. This is where I cut wood, obviously. I've got a pretty raggedy looking white pine there we're going to cut up before long. But before I get there, what is that red squirrel doing? You see him right there? What's he doing? He just stole some of my newsprint I had out here. Guy can't sit down and read the newspaper without the red squirrels coming and getting it. Where on earth is it going? Probably to build a nest somewhere I don't want it to be. Anyways, just looking to see what's missing out here now. That sort of sidetracked me. Anyways, we will get back to the task at hand. Oh, there he is. He's still sitting there. What are you doing? Building a nest in there? Maybe that's an indicator to me. I need to get that cleaned up. Yes, I know. I will get to that. You better find another spot to live there, buddy. You're going to be getting a house moving party very soon as I get in here and clean that up. As I was saying, back to the task at hand. What I'm doing here today is I'm talking about something that I get a lot of questions about, and that's my lasers. I've got 2 lasers on this Sawmill, 1 and 2. Today we're going to talk about it, and I'm going to explain how things have been going with it over the 2 years or so, maybe a bit longer that I've been using it. Welcome back. So first things first, why do I have lasers on my Sawmill? Because I did cut for years without lasers. The reason I have them is they allow me to see where the blade's going to cut, and that saves me ultimately a little bit of time. So if we have a look here, I've got a switch in here that'll turn on my lasers. So I just clicked it on, and that's going to allow a laser line to come off that side where the laser is and this side where this laser is. This is going to broadcast 2 lines, one on this side of the log, and if we duck around, it's also going to broadcast a line on this side. The reason I have a line over here is so that I can see if the blade is going to cut the log stops. If you ever hit those log stops or anything in the way of the blade, you know that that's not a fun day. Over here, this is the more important laser for me. When I'm standing back here, just about ready to start cutting, I will often look down the log to see where the blade is going to cut. And that gives me a good idea whether I have the height set correctly. Up till this point, before I had lasers, I'd come out here with a tape measure and I would estimate where I want my first cut to be. Alternatively, I've seen people before, they lean back like this and they sort of look at the end of the blade, edge of the blade, and estimate that way. Both of those ways would work, but the laser just saves me a little bit of time. I can quickly get an idea where the blade is going to enter the log, and I can also see where it's going to go down the log. So it's kind of nice that way. So in terms of the most important laser, I would say this one is probably that, because this one is going to give you a quick reference for where the saw blade is going to cut. The other one is kind of nice just because it'll give you a quick idea whether you're going to hit the log stops. And if you look down there, you can see how the laser is on that log stop right now. So obviously I wouldn't cut at this height. Otherwise, I'd mow that log stop right off. And if you were just looking at the blade and wondering why it's arched like that, it's because it's not tensioned. Now, let's talk a little bit about how I came to start using lasers on a sawmill. Well, the idea came from when I was using a miter saw. My miter saw has not a laser, but a light on it, and that light shows me the cut line. I kind of like that, and it's always saved me time. And then one day I was out here, and I thought to myself, why couldn't I have something similar for my sawmill, just to give me a quick reference point for where things are going to cut? And after a bit of research, I came up on a company called Apenex, and their website had a bunch of options. And so I talked to them, and they said this would probably be the best option for me. And after some good advice, I ended up with a setup just like this. Now, let's just turn this laser off as we continue talking about the lasers. So these 2 lasers here that I currently use, I've used for about the last year. These are 50 milliwatt powered lasers. So these lasers get their power from a 12-volt battery under this cover. The 12-volt battery is used for starting my electric start engine for the sawmill. Now this 12-volt battery is connected to this DC converter, that's this thing right here, right there, that DC converter will step down the voltage from 12 volts, which is the 12-volt battery, to the 3 volts needed for the lasers. So this requires 3 volts, that requires 3 volts. The 12-volt battery needs some sort of a step down to get it to that. And so that's where this DC converter comes in. And in that wiring, I also have a switch. And if we step around this way, I have the switch mounted right in here. It's a little rocker switch. And so that'll control the electricity going from my 12-volt battery through that DC converter down to my lasers. And my lasers are hooked up so that they come on together and go off together. They're not independent. And that's just one of the ways I decided to wire it. So the actual laser, you can see, once we leave the DC converter in the switch, we follow this wire downwards and then right here to the actual laser. Now this laser mount, this is a stationary laser mount. So basically you're going to use a little Allen key, and if you need to make any adjustments, there's 2 little spots to do so. This mount is the same as that mount over there. What I did was I basically drew a line once the blade was tensioned all the way across my sawmill so that I could find where it lined up with the center point of that laser. Once I found that, and that took a bit of work, then I drilled and I bolted this bracket to the actual door of the sawmill. I did the same thing on both sides. Now once I got it really close, then it became a matter of putting the laser in position and then adjusting it. And the truth is, to adjust this, there's not a lot of up and down motion. It's side to side, more or less. So to get the up and down motion where you need it, what I did was I just put a bit of a crescent wrench on the edge, and I just ever so slightly adjusted it so that any inaccuracies I made when mounting it could be corrected. But once this gets mounted, you just don't touch it, and you don't have any problems. So just be careful you don't bump it. But I have bumped it before, and what you do, you just have to come back and you have to realign it. So this bracket here, this stationary bracket that I currently use, I find it to be the best option. I used to use this bracket over here. And what this is a more adjustable bracket, and there is applications for it, but I just found that the vibrations from the sawmill didn't allow me to keep this sturdy, stationary, like this one does. This one stays put. I haven't touched it in, I don't know, probably the better part of the year that I've owned the laser. And this one, on the other hand, it did vibrate just a little bit. And despite having the adjustments here that you can tighten, it did cause a bit of a problem. And so I decided to forego that adjustable mount, and now I use these ones and I find them a lot better. Now let's just take a step back for a moment and talk a bit more about that DC converter. That's that silver piece you see up there. So that DC converter will convert 12 to 24 volts down to 3.3 volts or thereabouts. Now this right here, as I said, this operates at about 3 volts. It can go as high as 5 volts. It says 3 to 5 volts in the specs. And so that DC converter works perfect to knock the voltage down from the 12 volts on my battery there to the required voltage on the lasers. Now these particular lasers, as I said, were 50 milliwatts. These are really good for my application because they have a relatively wide operating range. They can operate well from -10 Celsius up to, I think, let me just double check, I think it was 40. Yeah, 40 Celsius. And so -10 to 40 Celsius, that's going to meet most of my needs. The truth is, I have been out here and it's been like -15, -17 Celsius, and it still worked. Now, if you get much colder than that, I'm not sure what would happen. I'm sure there's a certain mark where it's going to stop altogether, but I haven't found it. The truth is, if it's much lower than -17 Celsius, I probably have other things I'm going to be doing that are a little bit warmer than hanging out here at the sawmill. Everything gets really brittle, equipment-wise, when it gets really cold, so I often just pack it in for a slightly warmer day. Now these 50 milliwatt lasers were not my first lasers that I started with on my sawmill. If you've been around for a few years, you will know that I started with a 20 milliwatt laser. Now the 20 milliwatt laser did work well for the entire year that I used it. However, there were some drawbacks. The big drawback was the fact that its operating temperature was optimal from 20 to 30 degrees Celsius. That's a far cry from this one at -10 Celsius up to 40 Celsius. Now I do understand there is some buffer in there probably, and so you probably could use it outside of that temperature range like I did, but in order to get the optimum performance, they suggest that range. Now with that 20 milliwatt laser, I used it all winter long, and I actually found it did get to a point when it was too cold and it didn't perform very well. Now that was quite cold. I was using it in temperatures down to like pretty close to -10 Celsius and it worked fine. But for the optimum performance, warmer temperatures were better. So that led me to this one. Not to mention the other one, 20 milliwatts. If you're looking to purchase it, I believe it's more expensive than this one, the 50 milliwatt unit. This one right here is $99.50 US currently, based on what I saw just today on the website. In terms of the bracket, I think the bracket is right around, well, I can look it up. I think it's $18.50 US. Is it 1850? 1850. That DC converter is 1950 US. So if you guys were to add up those three things, there's three things to this: one laser, one mount, and one DC converter, you're floating somewhere in the neighborhood of $137.50 US for a single laser setup. Now that 20 milliwatt laser, I think it started at, how much was it? It started at 139 US. So it's more money. And so this one, which has more operating temperatures and is cheaper, in my opinion, would be the better bet. And one more thing I'll mention about my older laser setup, that's the 20 milliwatt laser, it's that I didn't have it powered with a 12 volt battery. At the time, my Sawmill did not have electric start. And so what I did was I used a 3 volt power source. It was essentially a battery pack about this big. And I had it zip tied to the bottom of this bracket. This bracket used to be over here on my other laser. And I had that power source where I put a battery in, mounted just underneath this bracket. And then when I went to saw, I would just hit a little switch. The batteries would provide the 3 volts of power to my lasers. It would come on. When I was done sawing, I would flick the switch on that battery power source and it would go off. Now that worked fine and dandy. However, it was a lot less convenient than having a hardwired system to a 12 volt battery. This 12 volt battery, I haven't had a situation where the battery goes dead. And because of that, I don't have to worry about always having little batteries on hand like I did when I had the smaller 3 volt power source. I think that power source used AAA or AA batteries. And so it worked fine, but in the cold weather especially, those little batteries lose power very quickly. So I was constantly having to keep extra batteries on hand. As I said, this setup here, I don't have to worry about anything. One thing I want to mention is about safety here for a moment. Having a laser on this side, generally speaking, it is a bit safer than having a laser on both sides. The reason being is when I fly around here and turn on the switch, and then I'm working, you'll notice if I look back this way, I could potentially look right into that laser. So I've trained myself that I only look ahead. But if you're new to this and you look backwards, you could get yourself into a bad situation. Now there are glasses out there that will protect you from the radiation, but obviously I don't have those on at the moment. So if you're gonna get one laser, my suggestion, get this laser down here on my left. It's gonna give you a good cut line, and you don't have to worry about any other laser. You just have to worry about paying attention to your log stop height. Another thing I'll mention here is about my location of my sawmill. It's under a shed right now, and so what that does is it protects me from direct sunlight. If you're going to be out sawing in like a field and you get direct sunlight, you're probably not going to have a laser line that shows up that's as visible as this. You'll notice this laser line, like, it's clear as day. That's because not only is it a gloomy day out here, but I'm also under cover. When you're out in a field, you're going to have a lot more exposure to sunlight. So you just got to double check and think about whether you think the lasers will give you enough brightness that the sun won't wash out that laser line. So my main concern when I first put lasers on my sawmill was the temperature. My second concern was vibration. As you know, these sawmills do vibrate. The engine is right there. There's no rubber dampening at all. It's steel on steel. And so my concern was with that engine moving, it was going to cause long-term problems with the laser due to the vibrations. I've been running these types of lasers now from Apenex for 2 years. I haven't had any problems. So I'm pretty confident they're going to continue working. If they would have broken, I would have assumed they would have broken within that first couple month period of sawing, but I haven't had any problems. And they're out here non-stop. They've never left this location. They get all kinds of weather, and so I'm happy that they're still kicking in there strong. Well, hopefully I shed some light on that and gave you guys a good idea how things have been going for me. Overall, I'm still very happy that I have them. Just that little bit of savings where I don't have to break out the tape measure to see where the saw is going to enter the log. Well, that's kind of nice. I also like it because sometimes I've got caked on dirt right up near the top of the log, and it's only down maybe a few inches, but I can turn on that laser line and I can tell with certainty whether the saw blade is going to be just below it or whether it's going to hit it. And that saves me a bit of time, because if it's just below it, I don't even wipe the end of the log off. It's going in the pile anyways. So stuff like that is kind of nice. Not to mention, it's a bit mesmerizing watching that blade cut through that that laser line that it creates. It gives me that reassurance that everything is set up correctly. So if you have any questions at all about this laser setup, be sure to let me know down below in the comments. If you've got a laser setup or something similar, be sure to share it. We're all a big community here. We all enjoy the same thing. We like getting outside and doing some sawing. As always, do me that big favor, give her the old like-a-roo, make sure you subscribe, and I'll see you next time.